Good morning. It's exciting to be here at Impact X 2022. Last year, for those of you that joined, we were in an empty room with video screens talking to 500, 600, 700 people around the world. Today, it's nice to have everybody here in person, or most people. I'd like to also start by acknowledging the traditional owners of land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present, and emerging. I wanted to start with a phrase that is really apt for our time. Strategy is a commodity, execution is an art. All of us in this room understand the importance of moving to a zero carbon and a nature positive future. We all understand that big ideas, big ambition, big strategies, and urgent action is what is needed to deliver against the challenges we face. But in my experience, strategy and execution starts with listening. Listening to our stakeholders, listening to citizens, listening to our communities. Because that's when we can really develop shared experiences, understand the commonalities, work through our differences, and start to execute at speed and scale. I was very privileged with the board and management of WWF that one of our board members, Phil Riss, took us to his country, Girramay, in far north Queensland last month for a 2.5-day immersive on strategy with elders, indigenous rangers, and local communities. It was really about listening to indigenous knowledge, to indigenous lived experiences, and also about an indigenous voice to which we all need to rally around in 2023. But if I cast my mind back to 2019, when Ross Garnaut produced his book, Superpower, and talked about how Australia could become an economic superpower and a renewable energy exporting superpower, many, perhaps some of you in the room, thought it was a bit of a pipe dream and was not that realistic. I would argue that the last 3 years have changed that view dramatically. The idea that we could generate 700% renewable energy that both meets our domestic needs and then could be exported to the rest of the world was an idea. Last year at Impact X, the Business Council of Australia, the ACTU, the Australian Conservation Foundation, and WWF launched a report which identified 6 export opportunities. Those 6 export opportunities would deliver close to 400,000 new jobs and $90 billion worth of exports to Australia by 2040. And so, if we reflect on what's happened in the last couple of years, particularly at a state level, and I really want to give the nod to Australian states for their leadership in our push to become a renewable energy exporting superpower, it is a radically different world. In 2019, WWF decided that we would rate our states and federal government on their progress against being that strategy of being a renewable energy exporting superpower. We did a second scorecard in 2021, which showed a lot of progress, and we will be publishing the third one on the 28th of November, which will show a lot of horses have changed their positions in the national race. But I asked the team, so give me the top highlights of what each of the states have done. The list was so long, we chose a couple. In my view, these are either world leading, world largest, world biggest, world firsts in the renewable energy space. but it's such an fast evolving space. I think it's hard to say that definitively at the moment, because there'll probably be another announcement at COP27, which will trump some of these. But I really wanted to pay homage to what has happened at a state level, and the progress that has demonstrated that we are able to become a renewable energy superpower. But the prize is not about an internal race within Australia. The prize is about the global race that is on. And so on the weekend, Minister Chris Bowen announced that Australia would put up its hand with the Pacific Island nations to host COP31. This is a chance to revive our nation's reputation on the global stage. It is a chance to build an equal partnership with our Pacific Island neighbours and our closest friends on an issue that they care so deeply about, because their lives are literally at risk. But I would argue that it's also the chance for a nation-building exercise around a global conference to rally the whole nation behind COP31. All states, all territories, thousands of Australian companies, thousands of civil society organisations, hundreds of academic institutions, all federal governments working together with our Pacific Island neighbours and peoples to really try and not only transform Australia, but also transform the world. But in doing this, we need to think about something else, which is the theme of ImpactX this year. We need to do this in a way that is nature positive, because we're not only facing a climate crisis, we're facing an equity crisis, we're facing a crisis on our biodiversity loss as well. Now, we need to set ambitions around what a nature positive nation by 2030 would look like. I would argue that nature-based solutions needs to be a core part of what Australia is going to do in terms of being net carbon neutral and nature positive. One of the examples which my colleague Rachel Lowry will talk about in another session today is around a project on koalas called Koala Friendly Carbon. It's a great example of working with landowners, local conservation groups, state and regional government to not only double the number of koalas at a time when their numbers are rapidly declining, but also harness the markets to get 250,000 climate and koala-friendly trees back into the ground in the Northern Rivers area. But whilst we're all focused on this next decade that we're in and urgent action, I wanted to give you a thought to step back, not only from a decade, not only from a century, but over the last 300 or 400 years. You may be aware of the World Economic Forum's narrative over the last 5 to 7 years around that we're going through the fourth industrial revolution. It means transforming using some of the technologies that are current or emerging and driving a different way that society will work. But for me, the frame of an industrial revolution is problematic. It involves digging stuff up, chopping things down, and then putting it into an industrial process where we produce things to be consumed and then thrown away at the end. And that is a creation of the last 400 or 500 years of thinking. But it doesn't have to be like that. It's about going beyond recycling or reusing. It's about finding innovative ways to feed, clothe, and house and provide energy to 10 billion people across the planet in a fair and equitable way. I would argue that the great news is that we are in a place in time where we have more knowledge, more technology, more connectivity, and more reasons to drive this transformation at a faster rate than in any other time in recent history. But it's going to take a lot of collaboration between all sectors to do that. But given the enormity of the challenge that we're facing, I think that the mindset of an industrial revolution is the wrong one. I'd like to suggest that we need to have a mindset which sees this as the first regenerative revolution, that rethinks the way that society operates, that has a regenerative economy, a regenerative society, and a regenerative planet. So, to conclude, 84 months left to the end of the Decade of Action to achieve two things. In Australia, to make us a renewable energy exporting superpower and show the world how a country that a decade ago couldn't have possibly dreamed of doing this will in the next decade transform itself in a way that we have only had opportunities we had not had opportunities in this last century. The second piece is to lead globally on nature positive solutions and implement them in scale and bring the investment in required to do that. But the last thing, which is a very now moment, is that I believe that this conference and that we should set the ambition to rally the whole country, 26 million Australians around 2026, hosting a COP to partner with our Pacific Island friends and neighbours and to demonstrate how an event like this can be a nation-building opportunity to achieve the goals that we're talking about here today. Thank you very much.